All right, Steve Wood, Big Book Compendium. Welcome. I'm going to start off with a story that kind of signifies what we're covering tonight. So, this is an old story. I mean, I actually remember hearing this years ago. And it's a story. So, in Wyoming in the early 1900s, the coal mining was huge. And basically, the thing that they had trouble with in the coal mines back then was methane gas. So what they would do is they would put someone on like a perch, almost like a swing, and they would lower them down into like if it was a downward cave, or they would walk into it and they have a bird in their hand. And it sounds morbid, but if the bird died, that means there's methane gas and you can't go inside. So this time they're at a big hole in the ground where the mine goes really far down. It's not even a mine yet, and they got to dig it. And what, they can't even see the bottom. It's a bottomless pit. And so basically they're looking at this pit and they're like, okay, do we even want to go in there? And this one guy steps up from the back. He goes, I'll go in. And this is a devil may care chap. He's an alcoholic as well. He doesn't have anyone left in his life. He's always the guy that likes to go down these deep pits. He doesn't wear a harness or anything. And so I'll go down there. So, they start lowering him down, and he gets down about 200 feet, and the bird's fine. It's flying around. So he's like, all right, bring me back up. And they start bringing him up, and halfway the cable breaks, or the machine breaks and unravels and drops him about 200 more feet, right? The swing breaks and he's holding on to the wire cable with his hands, and the cable's going through his gloves. And then he sees it's still a bottomless pit. And after holding on to the wire, it starts cutting, into the bone, into his bones, and, through his hands. And, he knows he's not going to make it. There's no way I'm going to make it out of this thing. And it's been years since he's even thought about God or thought about praying. And he starts praying. He starts thinking about his past and all the regrets he has, the bitter feuds, the destroyed friendships, the family members he refuses to talk to, all those he's harmed by his behavior. And he admits that stuff to God. And he feels shame, but he lets it go. He gives it to God. He lets go of those feelings, and the pain floats away. And he says, God, he's holding on to that cable. He goes, let this be painless. And he opens his hands and he drops 10 feet. He's standing there and he looks at his hands, bloody, and he says, why didn't I let go sooner? That's the moral of the story. And where we're at in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is the journey. What I like to call the 3 steps to Utopia, 5, 6, and 7 is where we'll be at the next couple of weeks. And the 3 steps that we do in one powerful, life-changing day, a day where, truth can hit us right between the eyes. Awareness, like it's almost like getting a new pair of glasses. Tears flow out, miracles take place, forgiveness occurs, lifelong pain melts away. The pain melts away, right? And most of all, we become whole. When that happens, the awakening begins. And because within these steps, because of why that happens, because within these steps, we meet God. Sorry, my phone thing. We meet God. And I've been on both sides of the fence on 5, 6, and 7, doing my own 5 steps, of course, and guiding others to 5, 6, and 7. And when hearing a 5th step, I have watched men and women change right in front of my eyes. And the problem is, it's not easy to discuss this stuff with another person and then especially let it go, because, well, we believe that suffering is holding on to us, and we're the ones holding on to suffering. But how do you see that if you believe that your whole life? So when we do the 5th step, you're becoming aware that no one else is responsible for your suffering except for one person. You. It's no longer that person there. And I'll say this more than once tonight. There's no recovery in being a victim. But when this new understanding is achieved, you don't get this new understanding from studying it, reading it in books, going to groups and talking about it, therapy or rehab. You get a new understanding by achieving letting go. And some of the things we're going to talk about today are it's just kind of the entry level of step 5. And it's like, what is step 5? What is confession? Is it a confession? What can we do about it? What are we about to do, and why we have to do it? Things like that. They could ask us those questions. And what if we leave something out of our 5th step? Who is the right person to hear our 5th step? Stuff like that. The right person for the job. Let's go to chapter 6. This is kind of the chapter that separates the men from the boys, so to speak. It's, first of all, if you notice the title, it's not called Into Thinking. It's called Into Action. What is action? Action is motion. It's something performed that is done. It's a state of motion, moving. It comes from a Latin word which means to do. So action is not simply a thought. It's beyond that. And but here's the problem. In recovery, your people say, take your time with the steps. Don't go too fast. Pace yourself. Take a break between each step. Breathe. Hear all stuff like that. Don't get don't get stuck in your head with your 4th step. I've heard that before. A common suggestion is people say, do 1 step a month. That God, thank God this beautiful book has something called time frames. After step 3, right at the 3rd step prayer, it says next. We launched on a course of vigorous action. Next, right? Next means now. It does not say take a break or wait. Even a little deeper on page 64, it says, though our decision was a vital and crucial step, got a little permanent effect unless at once followed by strenuous effort. That's step 4. To face step 5. To be rid of step 6, 7. The things in ourselves and blocking us, right? At once also means now. And the book does not tell us how long we should take on writing step 4. It doesn't go there. But there's experience from a sponsor. But it does tell us some time frames in this chapter, and we'll point them out when we see them. But take this all in for a second. If we're supposed to go slow, then why does this chapter in 17 pages contain 7 steps? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, right? To me, that's a strong indication that the wonderful writer of this book does not want us to drag our feet, take our time. I love the next 4 pages because it covers perfectly perhaps the 3 most important steps, which I call 3 steps to Utopia, 5, 6, and 7. So let's look at this. Page 72. And it starts off with a question. Having made our personal inventory, what should we do about it? What's the first thing we do when we finish our 4th step? Take a break, go make a pizza, go to the meeting down the street, pick up the phone. You pick up the phone and you call your sponsor. And you're like, remember, this is the 4 steps is the key to the future, right? The key to the future. You call your sponsor, say, hey, sponsor, I'm done with my 4 and 5. Let's do this, right? And he set a date. Simple as that. Look what else it says here. We're trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and discover the obstacles in our path. Let's break this one down. So let's look at what attitude is. Well, first of all, before I get there, it says trying. That's so we're attempting here something. We're attempting. you know, we're attempting to get a new attitude, new short creator, discover lost go path. So attitude is one of the key elements of our personality, our viewpoint or feeling towards something. Kind of like what you like and what you dislike, positive, negative, favorable, unfavorable evaluation. And here's the thing, you know, it's usually our attitudes when we get here is usually rooted in our belief system, right? The way you look at something is going to be rooted in belief systems that might go way back. It could be religious, it could be upbringing belief systems. So attitude, I want to point out though, is all over this book. In the beginning, it talks about, you know, that we can only be defeated by attitude of belligerent denial, right? And never having a holier than thou attitude. It talks, but then it talks about some new attitudes we need. New attitudes. Hold on, my phone's being blown up. Sorry, blowing up my phone. My earpiece in. So basically, page 25 talks about how our attitudes towards life, towards our fellows, towards God's universe have been revolutionized. And 27 talks about maintaining a simple attitude, simple. But then 55, wherever it talks about God's within us, right? Deep down within us, it says, if you wish, you can search diligently within yourself. You have an attitude that cannot fail. The conscious, your belief is sure to come to you. There's that attitude again. 84 talks about our outlook and attitude, life has changed. And 85 talks about having a new attitude towards liquor. And then, of course, 86 talks about having the proper attitude. Here they're talking about a new attitude and a new relationship with our Creator. Relationship is a state of being connected. It doesn't say we're trying to get a better attitude, or a better relationship with God. It says we're trying to get a new one, right? So maybe they're kindly telling us that, well, why we need a new one, you know, with God, that it's saying about my old one. What's it saying? It's saying it's broken, it's not working. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And new means coming into being for the first time, never existing before. You know, never seen, never touched. It's like getting a new car. You've never seen it before, never touched it. Maybe you're the first person ever has. You know, but you know this. New suggests change. Spiritual awakening is about change. Personality change is about change. And by getting a new attitude with God, we get a new relationship with God. And if we have the same attitude and the same relationship with God that we bring into Alcoholics Anonymous, wherever we go, we're probably going to get drunk again or loaded again, because it didn't stop you before. In step 11, it talks about improving our relationship with God. Before we need a new attitude, before that improvements happen, we need a new attitude, new relationship with God, so I can improve. That's a big word, improve. But if you come in here and dance around, like I said, the old one, don't try it. You know, I could not bring my old attitude and relationship with God with me on this journey, because my old attitude and old relationship with God was very insufficient. It did not work in the past, and it was not going to work now. I needed a new relationship with God that would destroy my old theories and beliefs. But it wasn't like I sat there and said it to myself. I just was told, you do these steps and that will happen. And then it says, discover the obstacles in our path. Discover is again, an awareness word. Aware what previously has not been known. What does that lead to? Brand new awarenesses, right? New awarenesses completely shatter things. But the big word there is obstacle. Anything that stands between you and progress. If Kicken and I decide we're going to hike to the top of Mount Everest, and we come to this pathway about halfway up, and there's a boulder blocking our path, and we're following a map. Now we can go around it, but that might take us off the path, the summit, because that path is not on the map. We can avoid it by turning around and going home. But then we don't reach our goal, the summit, right? And if we want to get to the top of Everest, the obstacle in our path must be removed. It's the same thing here. If you want freedom, the obstacles must be removed. But these obstacles aren't between us and Mount Everest, between us and God. We call it the spiritual malady. And lastly, the path. What is the path? It's the access to a destination. To go, like the Wizard of Oz, the Yellow Brick Road, access to the wizard. But to go a little deeper on the path, it's an access to a source. And a condition is, first you must find this mysterious path that leads to the source. And most of them are looking for that their whole life without knowing it. Most want to find the source before and hope they find the path. What our steps are the path that will lead us to the source. 4 through 9 is how we find God. Where we find God is deep down within. So to overcome the malady, we must remove the obstacles standing between us and God within in our path. Back to the book. We have admitted certain defects, have ascertained a rough way what the problem is, the trouble is. We have put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. It does not say coped with, it says cast out. Cast out is something, means to get rid of something. Like you're fishing, you cast out the line, right? But this is like going way out, getting rid of it, disposing of it. Go to 27, and I know we read this a few times. But it says, Carl Jung is describing what we've just been talking about, this awakening. It says, they appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. I mean, redoing stuff. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which are once the guiding force of the lives of these men, are coped with. No, suddenly cast to one side. And a completely new set, there's that word new again, conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. It doesn't say these new conceptions and motives, they get to know, they're dominated by it. If I'm dominated by something, I'm overwhelmed. But ideas, emotions, and attitudes are suddenly cast to one side. Step 5 is the beginning of the casting out process. And that continues with 6 and 7. It's all one motion. And look what happens when we cast out. A completely new set of conceptions dominate us. Casting out, does casting out just happen? I mean, religious people and some AA folks, make it sound like it just happens when you turn your life over to God. Is that true? Let's see. Let's go back to where we're reading on 72. This requires action on our part. There's a secret ingredient, action, which when completed will mean that we've admitted to God, to ourselves, to another person, the exact nature of our defects. It says defects, not wrongs. Defects, shortcomings, second wrongs are all the same thing. It's all that third and fourth column of our inventory. This brings us to the 5th step in the program recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. I'm going to put up a little slide on here. It's a little one. It's the only one we got today. Let me all right, I think everyone can see that. So let's break this down. Admitted to God, to ourselves, another human being, the exactness of our wrongs. So admitted means to declare something to be true. So it's an honesty thing, and this is rigorous honesty. Step 5 is not a therapeutic counseling session. We're not simply admitting our wrongs. we've been admitting our wrongs our whole life in our head. Oh, I screwed up again. And, you know, step 5, we go way deeper. It's an opportunity for us to go beyond admitting our wrongs, but admit the exact natures of our wrongs. So exact is something that's completely inaccurate, you know, correct, you know, with accordance to facts, not a guess, not an estimate. Nature is the essential characteristics by which something is recognized, right? You know, you could say Sweden is beautiful, right? Because it's the nature of it, the way it looks. So exact nature will be completely correct in accordance to characteristics by which something is recognized. Wrongs are errors, and those wrongs can be unjust, dishonest, immoral, you know, improper. So we are not getting to, so what we're doing here is we're getting to the exact natures of why we are dishonest, immoral, improper. You know, the exact natures of our wrongs are misdirected instincts. You know, that's the high self-esteem, the low self-esteem, the pride, the sex relations, the personal relations, the emotional security, the financial security, and the ambitions, and also our mistakes, selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and frightened, right? And sex inventory, they add inconsiderate. That's why we have this wonderful inventory, thank God, you know. So let me give you an example of what the difference between a wrong is and exact nature of a wrong. Let's say I hypothetically go over to Jack's house and beat him up, right? The exact nature of the wrong is that I was driven by, so the wrong, that's the wrong, is I beat him up, but the exact nature of the wrong was I was driven by pride and high self-esteem, the misdirected instincts that led me to being selfish, self-seeking, and dishonest. So the exact nature of my wrong is what drove me to go harm him. When that happens, I know the truth and gain this beautiful new awareness, and I'm no longer, again, a victim. See, step 5 brings our instincts from darkness to light. And when that awareness happens, that again, change begins. You know, there is a level of humility that only comes from admitting the exact natures of our wrongs. I'm going to close this one out. And, you know, but see, here's the thing is, we're conditioned from a young age to keep secrets, to hold on to things. You know, sometimes our parents tell us, you know, did bad things to us and say, hey, don't, you know, it could be violence in the house. Don't tell them about that. And it spills off into you, the way you live your life. But we keep things tucked away. And I don't want anyone to know about this stuff. And, you know, it's better left unsaid. There's a reason why people say they don't have resentments or harms, or the only person I ever harmed is myself, because they don't want it. They're protecting it. We protect them by bringing, you know, what we're trying to do is do something different. You know, we're trying to bring them from, you know, from protecting them into the light. And when that happens, and you're bringing out this stuff that you never want to talk about, what it does is it decreases. This is one thing a fist does. It decreases the amount of pent up energy inside. And that reduces negative feelings. And what happens there is healing starts to happen. The 5th step is driven from 2 procedures of the Oxford group. The second procedure, I'm sorry. And that is the sharing of our sins and temptations with another person given to God. You know, and they didn't do no inventory really. They just wrote some stuff down. They didn't call it inventory though. Just they listed stuff and they went over it. They didn't have no instincts or anything. But Sam Schumacher had a beautiful quote. The co-founder of the Oxford group. He says, we must always have a human hearer to witness, to validate our confession to God and make it, you know, real to us. So confession is one of the Oxford group's 5 C's, right? And we know confession has been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And it does have a spiritual power. But step 5 is not a confession. Matter of fact, it's way deeper than a confession. So a confession is acknowledging personal facts that a person prefers to keep hidden, right? But in step 5, you know, If step 5 was a confession, it would be who I resent and why, and that's it. That's a confession. Now, law sponsors focus on the confession part. What makes it not a confession is the third column. Shows us how we were affected and why we did what we did. And it pinpoints the driving forces of our wrong. Instead of looking at our faults of others, we look at the faults. Where am I to blame? Where am I to blame? Our mistakes, selfish, dishonest. Let's go back to this book. This is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. Yeah, it is. We think, well, we have done well, and not admitting these things to ourselves. There's doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. So what is a solitary self-appraisal? Well, an appraisal is it gives something value, right? If I find some gold laying around, I'm gonna go get it appraised. I want to find the value of it, but solitary means done alone, right? Now, how would I do a solitary self-appraisal of gold? Probably not very good. I don't know anything about gold, but I can bring my stuff to another who will go beyond a solitary self-appraisal. So Bill's telling us here, doing this, because sponsees will tell me all the time, oh, this is good enough for me to do this on my own. We already know this stuff. And you need to get someone else's appraisal of this stuff. Lots of people have asked me, why do you need to go give it? My kindergarten answer is this. Where, it's always this. It's where have we thought, where have those thoughts always been? Up here in our head. We need to go over with another person to bring it out in the open, right? It's we're bringing from where? Inside out, right? Where we've tucked it away. But unfortunately, that's where our temple is inside of us. And it's good to have that human here evaluation so we can truly see the truth. And it's also part of the formula. It's part of the recipe. You can't call it chocolate chip cookies if you leave the chocolate chips out, right? Many of us thought it's necessary to go much further. We will be reconciled discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons to do so. And here's a very good reason. The best reason, if we skip this battle step, we may not overcome our drinking. That's a very good reason. Now I'd like to talk about what happens with newcomers. Time after time, newcomers, that's someone who's just walked in the door, so to speak, first month. Right? And in these days, I mean, back in the day, today's newcomers can last forever. But time at time, newcomers will try to keep certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they've turned to easier methods. And what are those? Those easier methods, the half measures, the middle road solutions, easier, softer ways. What have we tried? Rehab, therapy, aftercare, church, spiritual groups, praying, meetings. None of this stuff is wrong. It's just not the formula of what we need here. We need to go much further. And where are they? They're out here, outside of us. The steps are our inner journey. And this paragraph really nails it why people relapse, who think they did the steps or tried the steps. I've watched this happen, right? And guys I've sponsored and just check out what it says. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they turn to easier, softer methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. Now, you're going to see some italic writing coming up, which makes it vitally important. We think the reason is they never completed their house cleaning. That's steps 4 through 9. Maybe they left something out of the 5th step. Maybe they never went and did the hour. Maybe they never let anything go. Maybe they went and never made an amends. Now, I could say maybe they didn't do anything, but that would be they never even attempted the house clean. They never completed it, says. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. I mean, they did not let go of the worst items in stock, not properly 6 and 7. And we'll get into that next week. But they
Here's the italic writing. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. Egoism is high self-esteem. I think I'm better than people. And they only thought they have humbled themselves. So if I don't humble myself, then I got pride, right? Showing, if I haven't truly done my house cleaning, my sick mind, here's what happens. And I said this before, a sick mind is still there. I said this many times. A sick mind cannot heal a sick mind. Self-will can overcome self-will, but the problem cannot heal the problem. Self-will can overcome self-will. That's what happens to people. But they had, look, here's why. They had not learned enough humility by letting go of pride. Not enough fearlessness. Fearlessness does not mean lack of fear, no fear. It just means it doesn't control you. And most of all, honesty. Honesty is the awareness of where I'm at, where I can tell someone what's wrong with me. And the sense we find necessary until we told someone all our life story. Italicize all. So, again, if I'm still run by those things, fearlessness, humility, and all that, if I not learned enough humility and fearlessness, it means I'm still run by pride, fear, and dishonesty. And the previous chapters, it said we went back through our lives, and we talked about that a few weeks ago. That means you go back as far as you can in this 4-step, as far as you can. If I didn't mention those far things that I could barely remember, my sponsor pointing things out, why I resented my parents and why I did this. And he's saying, here, all our life story pretty much says that, right? And there's a little bit more to it expressed similar in the 12 and 12 on page 56. It's a short one. I mean, you don't have to dig it out if you don't want to. Most of us would declare that without a fearless admission of our defects to another human being, we could not stay sober. It seems plain that the grace of God will not enter to expel our destructive obsessions until we're willing to try this. Back to the book. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. Oh yeah, we know that, right? Living 2 different lives separately, and when we live a double life, secrets, that's all secrets, right? It's where the mask we wear, He's very much the actor. Here's the actor again, right? To the outer world, he presents his stage character. Let's see if you relate to this or resemble this. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart, deep down within, he doesn't deserve it. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. Coming to his senses, he is revolted. And, revolt, that's sick. You're, sick about it. At certain episodes, he vaguely remembered. Remember those days? Vaguely remembers. They told me I had a good time. These memories are a nightmare. Fear. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. More fear of what others might know about me. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories where? Far inside himself. Pushing into that temple, pushing it towards God. He hopes they will never see the light of day, but they only see the light of God. He is under constant fear and tension, and that makes for what? More drinking. He pushes those memories in. That's the spiritual malady, that push. How can I get directions? It'd be like kicking, giving me directions with my fingers in my ears. I can't hear nothing. How many lives did did your instincts make you live? How many lives did you live? That's what's saying there. Look at this next paragraph. This is pretty deep. Psychologists are inclined to agree with this. We have spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but few instances where we've even given the doctors a fair break. We seldom told them the whole truth, nor we followed their advice. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we were honest with no one else. It's like saying, if I can't be, honest with a person like that, who am I going to be honest with? Small wonder why many in the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics and their chance of recovery. It was really low then. But I saw a therapist for years, since I was 6 years old when I threw a backpack at a kid in school. It was attack therapy back then. But I never once, and I saw them off and on for years, my parents, because they couldn't figure them out, because that's what they did. My dad went to therapy as a kid. I never told them the whole truth. And people think therapy is deeper than the steps. You know, I'm not knocking therapy. If you have to do it, you know, but do them both. But I've heard people at meetings say, you know, that a sponsor is like a therapist. The only thing they have in common is that you're both talking to a person about your problems, but they end right there. Similarities end, because the therapist believes alcoholics are expected. Not all therapists, but most of them. Because I did counseling for a long time, and then I did, you know, I was becoming a therapist at one time and did schooling for that. And what made me get out of it was because the overall aspect of this is that there's a struggle involved with our emotional feelings the rest of our lives. And that's what the therapist, you know, would say to you, they brought therapists into our recovery counseling class, saying, remember the people you're dealing with are always going to struggle with alcoholism. That's not what this book says. So the therapist focuses on treating emotional pain by pinpointing patterns and feelings and teaching them new ways to cope with the pain. There's not a coping involved with the steps. Also, therapy is just two people, you and the therapist. Step 5 is 3, God, yourself, and another person. It's not about patterns and feelings, how we should handle it next time. You can do that, but don't call it Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, don't call it the 12 steps. The 5th step is an opportunity for a person to discover the exact nature of their wrongs so they can let them go. Let go of the cause. So when you let go of the cause, the symptom goes away, right? Same thing with the cold. When you limit the cause, the cold goes away. The medicine we take is for the symptom. That's what a lot of people do in AA. I'm just going to eliminate the symptom, and they're still in pain. What's a sponsor's job in the 5th step? I say 5 things for sure. For sure. Listen, 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 and listen. You got that? Because some sponsors talk way too much in the 5th step. And they spend 30 minutes talking about something, and you're like, and especially if we've done the 5th step with someone else. My first sponsor I had was sponsored by the Poobah sponsors in the area, and they both were great. And then in between them and my current sponsor that I got with the Year Sober 20 something years ago, I went to another guy, and he just talked and talked and talked and talked. You know, it's a little more than listen, though. It's also to improve the information the sponsee has gathered by pinpointing out either something maybe they're not getting at the time. Don't you see the selfishness type thing? Or seeing, you know, when they wrote step 4, it's usually they're driven by pride, self-esteem, and all that, you know. They're not getting that. They got to see that. We want them to see the exact nature of their wrongs, but not tell them about it. We want them to see it. That's why it's so great to have it on paper. Do you see that? You know, and sometimes you can't say anything. It's going to come out later in the 10th step. You know, that might take them a long time to see it. And they need to see that they're selfish, that they're dishonest. They need to know why they have a problem with personal relations. You know, that level of humility comes by seeing you're driven by misdirected instincts. Until that level of humility is achieved, you will never be recovered. You'll always be fighting anything, anyone, even alcohol. And you will always blame others for your problems. Got to remember something that's very important. It is in our nature to blame others. So we're going against the grain, right? And for some, especially alcoholics, it's the easy way out to blame others. You know, is that your booze? That was the first time my dad walked in the room. That's your alcohol? Oh no, that's my brother's. But then it gets worse. I'm gonna blame them. Well, he's the one that started the fight. You're the one that, you know, people come and step on our toes. We retaliate, and they come back and hit us, and we're mad at them. Instincts in collision. But see, when the person sees that they're the one to blame, that's the breaking point. It's like the light bulb goes off, but explodes at the same time. Until that happens, you will always be a victim. And there's, like I said, there's no recovery in being a victim. There's no, what has ever gotten you out of you is being a victim of it. Some, we did things that are horrible. I mean, sorry, things happen to us that are horrible. Maybe when we were kids, but it's no longer what the person did to us, it's what we've done with it for the last 15, 10, 30, 40 years. Check out this. We must be entirely honest. That means rigorous honesty, completely honest with someone if we expect to live long and happy in this world. Rightly and naturally, we think well before we choose the persons or persons with whom is to take this intimate and confidential step. Those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, and of course, will want to go to the proper appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. Though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk with someone ordained, because they can protect us, right, by an established religion. We often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. Of course, we sometimes encounter people who don't understand. The reason I say they protect us is because an ordained person, if a person's like told someone like in prison a secret about them and they go to the guard, or if you on the streets told someone, you may not trust anyone. An ordained person can't do that. They can't go telling you. It's, because it goes against Hippocratic oath. It says, also says, of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. Remember that, because I'll come back to it. If we cannot or would rather not do this, we search out acquaintance for a closed-mouth understanding friend, perhaps our doctor or psychologist. So I'm going to explain this paragraph because it's a lot of controversy here. In 1937, when this book was being written, there's only two meetings, Akron and New York, right? Cleveland is a little further down the road. But their dream was to make it everywhere. And so they wrote this book in hopes it would spread, right? Ultimate, send out the product. Say there's no AA in California. Let's say it's only Kim in California. Well, he's AA number one in California, but he buys the book. Who's he to take his fifth step to? He would have to, this is the advice they're saying for him, right? That's why they have this in here. That's why they have the ordained friend or doctor or psychologist. Plus they had no idea that there would ever be a number 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 in California. They had no idea that there'd be 10. There's another reason why it's in here. Remember when they put the committees together, they had the evangelist Christians in there. And then they had the conservatives who were, that was the conservatives. You had the conservatives, and that's the evangelist Christians. You had the liberal ones, and that was the ones who were in the middle, who just, they're still kind of Christians, but not pushing God too much. And you had the radicals were atheists, agnostics. But the evangelists Christians, they pushed Bill hard to put this in here. And they believed that if it wasn't in here, they would lose religious members, because if they're religious members and they've been going to confession since 8 years old, and now they're telling them to go to a drunk, they may not get that. Fritz Mayo was the one who suggested it, and he pushed it on Bill. And Fritz Mayo later said he wished it was never there in the book. Matter of fact, Bill wanted to take out in 1955 when the second edition came out, and he was denied. And I think it was because they realized, well, for one thing, A was, 10,000 people or more at that time. The reason, here's why I don't like this suggestion in the current age. Friend, doctor, ordained person, all that. Do they know our instincts? Do they know what it's like to be alcoholic? People suggest this all the time at meetings, and what happens? It does an A member gets shortchanged from hearing a fifth step. You're taking away, a lifeline from an Alcoholics Anonymous member here, a fifth step. That's very important. If you want to go to an ordained person, do a fifth step with an alcoholic first, and then go to that person. I'm not saying you can't do that. Here's more. It may be of our own family. I don't recommend that. I know guys who've gone to their wives and try to do that. But we cannot disclose anything to our wives or parents which might hurt them and make them unhappy. Of course not. Don't leave your four-step laying around the kitchen table. We have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. Such parts of our story we tell to someone who will understand, yet be unaffected. That's very deep stuff. Very deep stuff. The rule is we must be hard on who? Ourselves, but always consider others. Notwithstanding the great necessity for discussing ourselves with someone, and maybe that no one is so suited that there is no suitable person available. If that is so, the step may be postponed. Only, however, so there's a condition if we hold ourselves to complete readiness to go through it at first opportunity. There is a time frame, right? A hidden time frame, the first opportunity. So when I do step 5, at the first opportunity to do it, my sponsor says, hey, let's do it tomorrow. Let's do it, right? After completing step 4, we first, the now kicks in ASAP, as soon as possible. So now we get some very important qualifications for to hear our stories. This is very important stuff. We say this because we're very anxious to talk to the right person. Who's the right person? Not the guy that's got 30 years that sits in the corner of a meeting for the last 30 years. No, not knocking those guys, but it's not the right person. A person who is recovered, who has a working knowledge of the steps, right? We'll get more into this person. It is important he be able to keep a confidence. You don't want some guy that's outside the meeting going, hey, Joe Doe's pissed up, I heard yesterday. Man, that guy's crazy. Here's what he did. No, I've heard that happen before. And I think karma comes back to that person that does that breaks the confidence, because that's one thing that destroys alcoholics when we break their confidence. When we take that away, the confidentiality, that he fully understand, right? Meaning this guy, how's he going to understand it? How do you know anything from experience? He's doing the steps. The steps are, there's nothing about sponsorship of keeping someone sober. It's not about that. It's about taking the person through the steps, fully understand, meaning he does the steps and improve what we're driving at. What are we driving at here? We're driving at spiritual awakening. And look at this part right here. This is very misunderstood. He will not try to change our plan. Our plan is not our plan right here. Who's the we in this book? It's the first 100. That we will not try to change the first 100's plan. This recipe has been pissed on and thrown to the ground and stomped on, unfortunately. But there's some people in here that follow this big book and love this big book and know we cannot change this plan that these guys wrote. If the plan meant to be changed, then why isn't it? How come this big book has not been rewritten or revised? But we don't use this as a mere excuse to postpone. So let's talk a little bit more about I want to talk a little bit more as to hear our story. It is important we choose the right person to hear our story. In recovery land, which covers a lot of bases, there's a lot of watches that aren't ticking. We need to find a watch that is ticking and really ticking. We want a person that knows the process, right? That's the important thing. That's a condition that knows the process and has passion for it. And most important, is recovered, meaning the obsession is gone and he firmly walks with God in the light of God. Basically, rather than just talking the talk, he walks the walk. You know those people I'm talking about. The people we say used to talk funny at meetings and that guy's kind of a dick or that guy has got an attitude. I used to call him arrogant. No, they're telling us what to do. And the one thing, if I were to go back in time, I wouldn't change anything in my life, but let me rephrase that. If I were to get a new sponsor today, based on what I know now, here's what I look for in a sponsor. This person has to know the allergy, obsession. They can't explain that, then forget it. Understands that God's within, understands that, the instincts and knows why we have them and that they drive every thought, that they could explain a little bit of it to me, that they do regular inventory. And this is a big one for me, that they made their most difficult amends. They're not some guy that's got 15 years and got a divorce after 12 years and still hasn't made amends to their ex-wife. I can't. I could not have that guy as a sponsor. I'm sorry. I've seen that happen to some of the best. And that's what I'm looking for. Again, they have to know the allergiac session and from actual experience, understand that God's within, understand the instincts, does regular inventory, has made their most difficult demands. And I also could throw an asterisk one in there and just say someone that has heard some fifth steps. There's nothing wrong. Person's ever heard a fifth step, but that would be me. But page 75, when we decide who's to hear our story, here's another time frame. We waste no time. There's another hidden time frame, ASAP, right? We waste no time. We have a written inventory prepared for a long talk. That's not a 20-minute talk in the back of Starbucks written on a matchbook. It's not. We said earlier, it's not a confession. Here, check this out. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. So every time I hear a fifth step, this is right where I start. And I go to the book here. What we explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. For what we are about to do, we read that earlier, page 72. We are trying to get a new attitude, a new insight creator, and discover the obstacles in our path. Why we have to do it? Also on 72. We may not overcome our drinking. Secrets keep us sick, right? Just back to the book. He said he should realize that we are engaged in a life and death errand. Wow. Life or death errand. That's pretty deep. Overcoming cancer or having cancer is a life or death errand. Open heart emergency, open heart surgery is a life or death errand. Bleeding internally is a life and death errand. He's telling us the fifth step is a life or death errand. Again, if you don't see that, go back to when you walked into this room when you were in pain, right? And you'll remember the life and death errand. We don't want to go back and be there ever again. It's not the first time Bill mentions death in this book. Remember, he says, many pursue the gates of insanity and death on page 30, right? That's cycle of drinking he's talking about. And then 44, to be doomed to an alcoholic death, he talks about. To live on a spiritual base and all these alternatives to face. And then what does he say on 15? If he drank, he would surely die. Life or death, it's up to you. Get busy, they say in the Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying. Get busy living, get busy dying. That's the thing. That's the thing. And most people approaching this way will be glad to help. They'd be honored by your confidence. Honored by your confidence. It's an honor to hear a fifth step. A fifth step. Here's the thing. Pain is a part of our human experience. I'm talking about emotional pain. We're not immune to it. It comes in all shapes and forms. And when we experience, emotional pain at a young age, it manifests into adulthood. And what do? We self-medicate. Now, you don't have to be alcoholic to do that. But if you have an allergy, it's that cycle starts to happen. Within 4 through 9 is step 5. When we bring our pain to talk to another person, there's a whole bunch of people that are hurting who need a safe place to bring their story, to tell their story to someone. And that's what this is about. Sharing your story without shame, without fear, with a person who understands so you can be healed. You have to let yourself be healed. But sadly, millions of alcoholics and addicts never get it, to find that safe place to talk about their pain. Some never even know the 12 steps exist. I met a guy the other day, it's like that, 67 years old. Didn't even know he never heard of AA. He just got to rehab the first time. There are those in the fellowships who have years They have never gone to that safe place to talk about their pain. So they never discover why they have the pain. So they stay in the pain. Thank God we have this opportunity to talk to another. My sponsor did not shame me. He showed me love and he said, you have a lot of courage. Now go hear another story and tell them that. We have an opportunity to show another compassion, to show them love, to show them a form, to form an unbreakable connection that you never thought could happen with a person. Because of step 5, I met some of the most amazing people in this world, and I'm honored and blessed to hear their stories. I offer them a safe place to have a conversation that they've never had before in their life, but always wanted to. Today I realized I had to go through all my pain in life to get to the point of where I'm at now. Alcoholics Anonymous, the steps showed me that. I had to go, all these things on my 4th step got me to the point to get me where I'm now. This point in my life, and that is I can help another be free. I can help another be free. I can offer another a safe place to go. And it's just what the 3rd step prayer says. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me, to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me into bondage of self, that may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties. Thy victory over them may bear witness to those that would help with thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. That's what this is about. I just read this just the other day. It's St. Francis of Assisi, who was always, I got my middle name, Francis, and I grew up with it, and I've read books he's written and stuff. And then I was blown away. It was in the 12 and 12, the Francis prayer. This is a St. Francis quote. First, do what is necessary. Then do what is possible. Before long, you find yourself doing the impossible. What he's saying is, first do what is necessary, step 4. Then do what is possible, step 5. And before long, you find yourself doing the impossible, step 6, letting this shit go. That's what's saying there. Next week, we'll discuss 6, and I'm going to stop the recording.